he murders his own informant, and it seemed like he didn't even think twice about it. And so this was our introduction to Cassian.
You're listening to
Path of the Jedi
with your host, Ronnie Cruz.
All right, welcome to Path of the Jedi, the podcast where Star Wars meets personal development. My name is Ronnie Cruz, your host for this conflicted adventure. Conflicted because our nearly 2 week vacation is over and I am back home. Both situations I absolutely adore, right? Like, I love being on the road. I love traveling. I love seeing and exploring new things, especially because this particular trip we were back at Disney World, the happiest place on earth, my favorite place on earth. And we got to visit Disney World outside of our norm with just my sister and myself and the puppies. But a lot of the family came down and got a chance to spend time with them at Disney World. So I got a chance to experience Disney World and all its wonderful things through a different lens with family. Also got a chance to spend time with some dear friends of mine who have moved to Florida and I haven't really seen since pre-pandemic. So that was really nice too. So the trip overall was amazing. And of course, the stopover in Savannah, we were in Savannah for about 4 nights. Again, another one of our favorite places. So I love being on the road. I love traveling, even though it can take a lot out, especially if you're camping. If you're in the camper, there's a lot of things to tend to, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm more than happy to do it, and it's really more of an afterthought because it's such a good time being out there on the road and getting to hang out in a different situation. At the same time, I love being home. I love my situation here at home on the mountain in the woods. Certainly the dogs aren't very conflicted. I have one sitting in my lap right now. She's so happy to be home. The 2 bigger dogs are definitely love being back up here so that they can bark their heads off at the various wildlife that comes up to visit the cabin. Mainly squirrels. Occasionally we get the flock of turkey. Deer show up here all the time, but they bark at anything and everything that they can catch a sight of. So they're happy, and I'm happy too. I love being up here. It's nice to be back into our normal routine, as it were. So. I'm just a day or 2 back home, so there's still that freshness from the trip. So that's why I'm conflicted. It also conflicted though because the primary character that we're going to talk about today was conflicted as well. At least in the movie, we're going to actually get to see more of him in a couple of weeks. But I'm talking about Cassian Andor. That's right, Cassian Andor from Rogue One. Now, I chose Rogue One. I chose to revisit Rogue One for today's show. Because I'd heard while I was on my vacation that they were playing Rogue One in the movie theater again. They had done a screening of Rogue One, and I had no idea they were going to do that. If I had known ahead of time, I would have tried to plan on catching it down in Orlando. But I love that movie. It's a movie that the 2 standalones I will definitely have always a soft spot in my heart for because they're such good movies, right? They're so rich and there's so much depth to them, especially Rogue One. I've already actually talked about Rogue One on the show here. I can't even remember which episode. It was one of the earlier episodes on trust. It was a great episode on trust. So if you want to listen to that, you can go back to our archives and go listen to the episode on trust, a Rogue One story. Again, it's such an amazing movie, and it's so much depth to it that you can revisit it as many times as you want and have something new to talk about. And so that's what I wanted to do today. Again, because it just gotten re-released in the movie theaters for a limited time, and then I didn't realize actually I had completely forgotten that Cassian Andor, the TV show Andor, I guess it's Andor, is releasing in 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks as of the release of today's show. So yeah, that's an added bonus. I was watching, I was rewatching the movie Rogue One today to prepare for the recording, and I actually did hone in on Cassian as a character of focus for today's show. And then I realized after the fact that's perfect. Cassian, the Cassian Andor show is coming out in 2 weeks, so this is kind of a prequel, a precursor to the release of the Andor show. Now, I wanted to kind of hone in on Cassian Andor because I think there's a lot of depth to this character, and I'm so glad that we're going to get to see his show here in a couple of weeks, because, well, partly because I'll know whether I'm on the mark or not, or, well, more because it just adds even that much more depth to the character, right? As it is, just with Rogue One, he's already an incredibly written character. Like, there's already so many layers to him, and again, we have more than enough to talk about him today in the show. When we first meet Cassian in the movie, my initial reaction is that this guy is absolutely sketchy, right? We meet him in kind of these back alley, shady parts of town, and he's getting information from one of his informants, right? So a spy that he's been working with, I guess, that's getting him information from the Empire, and so they meet in these back alleys. There's stormtroopers patrolling the area. It's very kind of high tension situation. Like, they're imminently going to be caught. So he gets the information, and they're going to make their escape because the stormtroopers are just right there. The informant, however, is injured, like he's incapacitated, like a hurt leg or something, and wasn't going to be able to escape. And so Cassian, without hesitation, shoots him in the back. Right, he murders his own informant, and it seemed like he didn't even think twice about it. And so this was our introduction to Cassian. I think there is he teeters this line, right? Like he's been fighting for the rebellion for enough time. He's seen enough battle. He's seen enough war to kind of just be on this precipice of where am I right now? Who am I? Where am I? And starting to kind of like, what am I willing to do to continue this fight? Right? I think he's starting to teeter that line, and so I wanted to explore that because, like, I was rewatching the movie today, and I saw him as being sandwiched in between two other characters, right? The characters of Saw Gerrera and Jyn Erso, right? Obviously, Saw Gerrera, easy character to talk about. Well, not easy, but it's pretty straightforward. Like he's been fighting against the Empire. I mean, he was even pre-Empire, right? Like he was fighting. He was a resistance fighter since the Clone Wars. And so we see that all of those years of war and intrigue and doing what needs to be done, quote unquote, in order to fulfill the mission, it's taken a toll on him. Not just physically. I mean, physically, he's falling apart. He's on a breather machine. I think both his feet from the lower leg down have been replaced by mechanical prosthetic, and it's definitely taken a toll on his mind, right? It's taken a toll on his mind. Like he's not all there. Like he can't process well, at least my reading of it is that he's gotten to the point where he has a really hard time processing what's real and what's not, because he's been so in the thick of this kind of lifestyle in this world. And okay, so here's the thing, as an aside, Bor Gullet, all right, there's a lot of people that kind of question the purpose of this character. And for those of you who are listening to this who don't know who Bor Gullet is, for my non-Star Wars listeners, Bor Gullet is an alien creature, a sentient creature, I would assume. That is part of Saw Gerrera's group, who is this like nonverbal it's seemingly nonverbal, but I think telepathic alien creature with all these tentacles, and it's really, really kind of strange looking. I mean, almost an octopus type situation, but not. Anyways, Bor Gullet has the ability to read your mind, and to tell whether, especially, well, he's used as the truth teller, right? Basically as an interrogator, because this is not it doesn't seem to be an easy process. It actually seems more of a torturous process, because Saw Gerrera describes people who have been telepathically read by Bor Gullet as mostly losing their mind after the fact, or as a result of the process. So yeah, it's pretty complicated. This alien character, Bor Gullet, a lot of people have questioned the purpose of him, right? Like, what's the use of that guy? What's the use of that character? And I think it's to really kind of illustrate how paranoid Saw Gerrera has become at this stage in his life, right? Again, because he's been, practically all his life at this point. He's been involved in some kind of resistance fighting, underground fighting, guerrilla type warfare, spying, espionage, you name it. And he's painted himself into a world that he doesn't know what to trust. He doesn't know what's real anymore. He doesn't know what to believe. And so he has had to rely then on a separate, wholly, completely different entity, different creature, different being to tell him what's what. Right, to tell him to so that he can discern who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. Right, so he's lost that much touch with reality, and his ability to discern what's real and what's lies and what's fake. You know what I mean? That he's relying on Bor Gullet. I think that's an incredible character that really illustrates how far gone Saw Gerrera is. Saw Gerrera. And so this is one side of that spectrum that Cassian is facing, right? Like, again, he's teetering the line, and he's at a point in his life where he's having to choose, because of the things that he's been thrust into doing. Well, not just thrust, but he's made a conscious decision to participate on this side of the resistance, right? On this side of the war, and I guess what he's faced with is, what is he willing to sacrifice in order to do that? Is he willing to sacrifice himself to the degree that Saw Gerrera has, right? Like, obviously, Saw Gerrera has given up his entire self to the quote-unquote cause. On the other side of the spectrum is Jyn Erso. Now, Jyn, when we meet her as an adult, like, we see her at the very beginning of the movie as a child, but when we see her as an adult, she actually isn't participating in the war at all on either side. Like, she's not participating in the rebellion as a freedom fighter. She's not imperial empathizer or sympathizer, right? She actually, when we meet her as an adult, she's imprisoned by the empire and is then rescued by the rebellion. So she's not on either side, right? Eventually she gets pulled into fighting with the rebellion, but it's because of this. I think because she hasn't spent her life fighting in this war, one side or the other, that when she does get pulled in, she still has a little bit of that idealism, right? She really still believes in the true purpose, in the cause of fighting the fight that they're fighting, right? And so she hasn't really lost herself to the kind of the darker underbelly of this fight, of this ongoing war, like Saw Gerrera has, right? Who, again, has lost himself. So these are the kind of the two polar opposites of the spectrum. Again, they're all fighting for the same goal, the same ideal, the same outcome, but where they are on that spectrum are all completely three different places, right? And so Cassian is at a place right now, almost at a crossroads, and having to kind of choose, who am I going to become as a result of this fight that I'm fighting? Now, you might be asking, is Cassian really teetering the line. Like, after having talked about how we were introduced to him at the beginning of the movie, where he murders somebody in cold blood, I think it's pretty clear that he's already made his decision, and he's leaning more towards the Saw Gerrera side of the spectrum. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but if you look back at that scene, right, the scene where we first meet Cassian, when he shoots his informant in the back, you see a really, really brief moment of humanity, right? Like almost, it's kind of like a mix of regret or it's just like this glimpse of, man, like I did a bad thing just now, you know what I mean? And that's part of the beauty of Diego Luna's performance. Like, it's so subtle, it's so fast, but you know that he is really still, I think there's a big part of him that's still torn in having to do what he feels like he has to do for the cause. Further along into the movie, we see this conflicted nature again when he's actually given the secret directive, the secret order to assassinate Jin's father. Now, Jin's father is a scientist, renowned scientist, and had been held captive by the Empire to help build and to help design and build the Death Star. And so Cassian's order was to assassinate him because he presented too much danger, not just to the rebellion, but to the entire galaxy. And so when we get to the moment where Cassian has the opportunity to take the shot, right? He's up on his perch. He's got his sights set on Jin's father. He has the ability to take him out at this point. Cassian actually hesitates, right? Again, revealing his conflicted nature. Yes, the mission is very important, and he's got that side of him telling him, pull the trigger. But there's the other side of him that's telling him, well, there might be something more to the story that I'm not seeing. And on top of that, it's Jin's father, right? Do I really want that on my conscience? And so for me, this really kind of illustrates that deeply, deeply conflicted nature in Cassian. Yes, he wants to be a part of this mission. Yes, he wants to help the rebellion. Yes, he wants to be very much a part of this cause. He very much believes in it, but at what cost, right? Is he willing to lose his humanity? Is he willing to lose himself? Is he willing to lose his soul, sell his soul, like Saw Gerrera does or has done, all for the name of completing the mission? And I think that's what puts Saw on the far end of the spectrum, is that he was so focused on the fight, right? He was so focused on winning that he was willing to sacrifice himself, sacrifice his own humanity. He was so focused on fighting the fight that he forgot what he was fighting for in the first place. With Cassian, even though he was conflicted, we see by the end of the movie that he still is very much aware and in touch with the purpose of the cause, right? The purpose of the rebellion. He knows why they are fighting and what they are fighting for. When so many of the Rebel Alliance were turning tail and running, he actually decided to go with Jin on this final mission to the literal end. And in doing so, he shows his humanity, he shows his true self, and he shows us, the viewer, the audience, what it was that they were actually fighting for. And so I think this is an amazing example for us in the modern world, especially in this world of personal development and always striving for improvement, always even striving for achievement and forward progress. Like there can be the risk of losing sight of why we're doing this thing in the first place, right? Why we're on this track of forward progress and achievement in the first place. It's not to speak out against any of that stuff. I love it. I mean, I'm continually pushing myself and seeing what else I can do in terms of, tapping into my inherent limitless capabilities. And I work on encouraging other people to do that as well, and even coaching people one-on-one and in group sessions to do that and to tap into their potential. However, we can run the risk, if that's the only thing we're talking about, we can run the risk of losing sight of why we're doing it in the first place. Right, and if we do that, we really it gets to be a very, very dangerous spot. We fall into the closer to the side of Saw Gerrera than we probably should. I remember a time in my career when I first really started hitting a stride, and I was really gained a lot of momentum in my business. I was thrust into a high rank in my company. I became, a very, very prominent leader. I was speaking on platforms. I was doing lots of trainings. I was coaching and mentoring a bunch of people, speaking on and doing engagements in front of thousands and thousands of people, and that became my life, right? That became my day-to-day churn, and I was fighting the good fight, and I was helping people achieve things, and et cetera, et cetera. I was pushing myself as well to my limits, but I had gotten so caught up in all of that I had lost sight of why, right? I had lost sight of my purpose. I had lost sight of the thing that I was, of why I was doing all of it in the first place. I had gotten so caught up in the work, in the fight, that I had forgotten what I was fighting for, just like Saw Gerrera. And as a result, I was completely burnt out, and I fell into one of the deepest depressions of my life. Right. So yes, I do very much believe that you should have a cause, and you should have a thing that you're fighting for and working towards, whether it's a new goal, whether it's to kind of level up with your relationships and take it even a step further and make it even better. There are definitely always things in our lives that we can work towards improving, or even seeing what we can do better. However, you got to have a strong reason why you're doing that, right? You have to have a strong purpose behind why you're doing it in the first place, because otherwise it's going to all be very, very empty, right? It's going to be meaningless, and you'll find yourself in a spot like I did, where you have no idea why you're burning the candle at both ends in the first place. So I would say, really, really understand, if you're on a journey of growth, if you're on a pursuit towards excellence or a pursuit towards achievement, really, if you don't already have it, first of all, have a good reason why you're doing that in the first place, and then just continually remind yourself of that. And if you're like me, I've been on this journey for nearly 20 years. Well, I've been on this personal development and growth journey for more than 20 years at this point. That purpose and that why and that mission, right, that cause will evolve and will change over time. But you gotta always revisit it and remind yourself that, okay, I have to have a purpose, right? Otherwise, it all becomes very, very, again, meaningless and empty, and you'll find yourself just like questioning why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. So, use Cassian Andor as an example. Saw Gerrera was the cautionary tale that, that's what happens when you fight just for the sake of fighting, when you're doing something just for the sake of doing something, when you're working without purpose and without reason. Right? When you've lost that purpose and you've lost that reason, you become Saw Gerrera. And so, thankfully, Cassian didn't do that. He didn't fall into that. Right? He still was able to fight the fight. He still was able to fall behind a cause and a mission and work towards a goal, and he was successful at it because he really never forgot why he was doing it in the first place. Right? So again, if there's anything that you're working towards, if there's any goal or aim in whatever aspect of life that you might be aiming towards, never forget why you're doing it in the first place. And that's going to make your fight, that's going to make your mission, that's going to make even your goal that much more meaningful. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's episode. Sorry for the audio quality on this one. I'm actually, as I listen back to some of the clips, I'm starting to lose my voice in talking through this episode, and so thankfully I've made it through. But yeah, you might hear it might be a little quiet towards the end of this show today. It's completely I don't know. Maybe I'm not speaking correctly. I'm not using my vocal cords correctly for this one. Anyways, neither here nor there. What do you guys think? I absolutely love this movie, Rogue One. I love Cassian Andor, the character. Again, so much depth to it, and I'm so excited for Andor, the show, to come out. we're going to have a lot to talk about, and this will be a good springboard to that, right? This will be a good springboard to jumping into the show when it does release, which, for us here on the show, it'll be still a couple of weeks before we start diving into it, but I know you guys are excited for it as I am. Anyways, what do you guys think? Is there anything that resonated with you? Is there anything that maybe you hadn't heard or seen before, or you didn't realize about Cassian? Maybe there's some stuff you didn't realize about yourself, man. Just let us know. Hit us up on our socials. It's POTJ Podcast on both Twitter and Facebook. And of course, you can email us at info@pathofthejedi.com. Put the title of this episode in the subject heading. And leave us your thoughts, or you can even record an MP3. I'd love to play that on the show. Okay, so for all my network marketers who listen to the show, I want to let you know that I started a second podcast. That's right, I started a second podcast like I needed something else to do, right? Anyways, it's a podcast called Path of the Network Marketer. Go check it out wherever podcasts are available. I am going to try to do an episode every day. They're roughly they average about 10 minutes a piece, with tips and tools and tricks with network marketing across the gamut, right? Whether it's fundamentals, or it's mindset, or especially with the stuff I'm learning right now with social media marketing and online marketing. So go check it out. Again, it's called Path of the Network Marketer. Speaking of network marketing, it's time for this week's shout out. This week's shout out goes to my dear friend out on the West Coast in Southern California, Melanie Banuelos. That's right, Melanie Banuelos. Melanie, I met through network marketing. That's why I referenced that. She and I met, at this point, maybe 6-7 years ago. And she's part of the same company that I'm with, called Yoli. I met her through our business. She's a distributor as well. She's also a registered nurse, which already I'm sure speaks volumes for a lot of us. For me, it just that to me means the world, because it speaks to her character as such a giving and caring person, and also incredibly intelligent. Such a sharp individual. I'm so proud of Mel. Like, she's really just over the years, the growth and the dedication to really just tapping into her capability and what she can inherently do, despite like just the odds and the challenges that she's had to face in her life, while still being able to be such a giver, right? Such a compassionate and empathetic individual. Amazing person, so dear to myself and to my sister, especially in these last couple of weeks, as we're still dealing with the loss of our dog. She's just been willing to be there for us, whether it's even just to say hi, you know what I mean, like without demanding anything back, without demanding checking in, how are you doing, like without demanding any kind of reports, just saying hi, you know what I mean. And it just again speaks to just her heart, her willingness to be a giver. I'm just super proud of her, and as a result, she's building a thriving network marketing business. I mean, that's just kind of the kind of individuals that do well in network marketing, especially in our company. So Mel, I don't know if you listen to the show. I'm sure you do, but I don't know how much caught up you are. But regardless of whether you do or not, I want the other listeners to know how amazing and wonderful you are. So this week's shout out goes to you. Okay, so that's going to do it, folks. Thank you all for tuning in for this week's Path of the Jedi. It's been a fun ride. Again, I love talking about Rogue One. And why wouldn't I, right? Why wouldn't I? We've got a lot to look forward to with Cassian and Andor coming out in 2 weeks. So, we'll just have to see what happens. Until the next time, guys, we'll catch you with a fresh new episode next week. Until then, be well, be safe, and may the Force be with you.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company nor Lucasfilm Limited, and is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names and sounds and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is intellectual property of Path of the Jedi unless otherwise indicated.